All right, well, Gary will be in here picking right up where he left off, jumping more into some of the mechanics here, and he'll go till about 3:30. Then we'll have a bit of a break with our exhibitors to set up for our closing panel back in here. So, Gary?
I'm on. Can you hear me? Yeah. How are we doing? Good. Hey, I only run half of you off. That's not bad. Another hour, I'll clear out the rest of you. We had some questions during the break about more of the process, or to finish up explaining. I'm going to have some slides I'll get to that actually shows it in operation. And let's go ahead and go to that. And if I don't get them answered, let me know, okay? Because this process takes a while. There's so much to talk about, so much to share. 39, well, I haven't been at this for 39 years, but I started 39 years ago. But here's the other field of beans, the 70 acres I talked about, first year T1. And we'll be showing pictures when they were younger. First, I want to build belief. I want you guys to see what my end result before I show you how I get there. Otherwise, you're probably just not going to listen. Okay? So this is what I expect, like I say, every year. If there's as much as one field out there, it's not the weather's fault. It's not my mother-in-law, my ex-mother-in-law's fault. It's not my children's fault. It's my fault. And yes, sir.
We've got a lot of conversations going on, so if we could just have one conversation, that'd be great so we can hear.
Somebody back there talking?
Yeah, there's just a lot of conversations. We can go ahead and pause those or take them outside.
Okay.
Different angles.
Thank you. Everybody good with that? Yeah. Okay. So we'll move on to the next one. Now here, I normally don't put slides in from a neighboring farm because I feel like I'm criticizing my neighbors. But I was asked to transition 70 acres of this about 300-acre farm, and so I took on that, and I was happy to do it. And this is the part that's still farmed conventionally of this field. And I wanted to point out, there's, just you can see a few weeds there, and you can see how the beans down in front here are getting kind of wilted. And I'm going to show another picture. Now, to the right of this point right here, this is the beans I'm transitioning. And to the left here is the conventional field. And they're good conventional farmers. Now, there's grass, there's a type of grass right here, that's end rows, so I didn't cultivate them, but I cultivated 8 rows over onto them, and I walked those because I wanted to keep the weeds away from me. That's a problem when you've got conventional neighbors. You've got to deal with the weeds going to seed on you. And I'm trying to keep the weeds away from me because I don't want them going to seed on me. But you can see here, there's a little bit of it's needing some water, but you can see over here the difference. And I feel that's because of the process that I just talked about, of how I work that field and get the carbon built into it. So I think probably the cereal rye is the most important, putting that massive cereal rye back in the ground. Then I would say probably the Linardite product that I use, that's like the Linardite coal, and that the guy I get that from has researched it. He works as the farm manager over at Western Illinois University. His name's Andy Clayton, and I can get his phone number for you if you're interested in that. And he knows, he's a good source to talk to about it because he's researched it. They know how much it changes everything and benefits from it. Here is just a video to give you the full shot around. But I expect my crops to always look better and be healthier than the conventional neighbors. They should be, guys. They should be. We've got every advantage on our side because we're not putting something on the soil that goes against the irrefutable laws set there by an infinite creator. Here's the field of beans before harvest, the same field. And here's coming up to 2018. This was last year, corn, and I'm going to swing around on the beans. This is on the 40 here. The first time you've seen a field of, this was all in beans the first year, and I split the field in half to break up my workload because I travel a lot. So far, the 2 years of beans I've had have averaged 67.5 bushels per acre. The average for that farm is 39 bushels per acre conventionally before I come into the picture. We should be far superior than conventional agriculture, folks. It's time to step up and say, hey, we're not going to take the back seat. Expect the best, make the best happen. Here's the wheat that would have been T2 after that first field of beans you saw. I did not walk this field of wheat other than I mowed around it and pulled 2 giant ragweed out of the very outside on the back corner. Somebody want to get the lights? And here is the stubble after that wheat was harvested, the stubble comes up, and as you can see here, we got somebody getting the lights. Right here is probably one of very few giant foxtail in this field. Most people will end up with a field that is totally giant foxtail after they grow wheat like that. And that's why, you know, I've always experienced these the other grass here is just grass, the orchard grass, the brome grass, and the timothy that has been seeded in the mix. So anyhow, I want to continually work on getting the weeds under control, and that's a good field, a good clean field of stubble. Now what we have is the second year of alfalfa clover. There's yellow blossom sweet clover, there's timothy, brome grass, orchard grass, medium red clover, mammoth red clover, balanza, which they say don't plant in organic because it comes a weed. I don't worry about weeds. Then there would be 3 kinds of alfalfa at least. Anyhow, there's 12 to 13 species. And I think the more species, the better. Massive growth in this field, massive, and that's what you want. This soil is doing, this plant and this field of cover is doing my subsoiling. It's doing my big data. I mean, it's doing everything. There's nothing you can buy that's for sale that'll do more for your soil than this right here. And so that's why I leave it a whole year. I normally do. I was asked the question, do I mow it at all? Normally, I mow it with a sickle bar mower twice during the year at least to get brown matter on the ground. This was so beautiful, and I enjoyed looking at it so much. I thought, you know, I'm having fun. So I just left it grow and let it all go to seed. I was hoping that I would have total green between my field of corn, my rows of my corn the next year, but none of it came up. I had no volunteer seeds, even though lots of it went to seed. People ask me if I have cutworms or wireworms, and I say, would you want to be a wireworm and a cutworm on my farm? That's not dubbed in, by the way. Okay? If I can increase my corn yields 25%, my bean yields, 25%, have 25% acres I've got to take care of, then I've got 25% less workload, 25% less cost, and then I've got the same amount of volume over the whole farm because I'm making the same amount of bushels off of less acres. I can let more of it build. And here's the corn that followed that. And here's the corn in 2017 that we had on the same farm at harvest time. My cousin does all my harvesting for me. They bin it, they dry it, they do everything for me, so I don't have to. They're wonderful to work with and have a big family growing up, and I'm getting them started on 640 acres, a full section, mile square, beautiful farm that's going to be certified or transitioned to organic. I wasn't willing to take on something like that. It's a little bit too far for me. Okay, now here we're starting into the process where we had questions that I think is really going to be where the interest is going to be today, for right now anyhow. What I'm doing here, this is the clovers, the alfalfas, that mix, that 13 species mix I talked about, and I don't know if it's exactly 13. There's Ladino, Alsac in there. But anyhow, right now I'm going to be shredding this. This is what I'm pulling, a shredder, a 14-foot a flail shredder. And behind that I'm pulling a 14-foot IH 500 disc. That's a tandem disc that's got the blades on it set to the maximum angle. And they're 24-inch notch blades, front and back, with a pip and harrow on the back. And what I'm doing is, I wasn't farming for quite a few years, and when I got back into farming, because the people that owned this farm at that time wanted it farmed organically, and I couldn't find anybody to farm it organically at that time. And so I didn't have any equipment, but I had a shop 6 miles away I was using to rebuild row crop cultivators. So I just bought a few pieces of equipment and started farming this 40, and then I got another 70 that's 6 miles away the other direction, and that's kind of how I'm getting back into it. I was going to wait until I was 100 years old and retire into farming, because I figured that'd be the time to start again. But I'm starting a little earlier than that. But here we go. I'm mixing the greens and the browns together, and if there's any chicken, pelletized chicken litter or anything, it could go on here to improve the sheet composting that I'm doing. I travel about 4 3/4, 4.5 mile an hour, high range in 4th gear, and you're looking about $18,000 worth of machinery there for primary tillage. Did I see a hand go up? You couldn't hear me? Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I'll repeat what I said. What I'm doing here is these. I've got the greens and browns. See, when I clip this, I actually clipped this twice in the fall before. It grew up, and we had one of them falls that stayed warm, and guess what you got to do when it grows back up and you have weeds? Weeds are determined to make seed. Cuckleburrs, you can cut them off, and they'll make burrs when they're that tall if they have to. And so I wanted, and I don't really have any cuckleburrs in this field. But anyhow, I mowed it twice. I had all that brown matter from the fall before. Then the green matter gets mixed with that. I'm disking. I've got 82 horsepower on a 14-foot flail shredder and a 14-foot disc pulling a harrow. You know when your tires are on green stuff and have no extra ballast on the rear wheels that I'm not pulling that disc as deep as the notches. But basically it just kind of stirs and blends the browns, the greens, and then the soil a little bit in with it. And so it's very minimal tillage because I just want to do what needs to be done, and that's all that's necessary. Okay? And here's when I turn my compost. After it decomposes, it's been 7 days. It was the 10th when I worked it the first time, 10th of May. And here's the 17th now. Stupid wanted me to go out there a lot earlier and on the 10th. But see, I want to feed a lot of biology. You can feed a lot more cattle with 20 ton of hay than you can 1 ton of hay. And so I want that soil, it's like a stomach, it's like a rumen. I want to give it as much stuff to digest as possible, so I've got plant food for the corn I'm going to be raising. And that's what I'm doing. Here's a 22-foot IH 490 disc with a 3-bar Rimlinger harrow with a 100 horsepower, 105 horsepower tractor with no fluid in the back tires. I'm going so shallow, it doesn't take much of anything to pull my equipment. I'm just working the aerobic layer. See, somebody asked the question how I changed it so quickly. I'm glad I thought of this. See, I want to dramatically change the environment in that top inch. If I can work tons and tons of stuff in that right there, it's going to have a greater effect than if I work it in that much soil. So I'm going to keep it really concentrated. How many people remember surface blending herbicides like Treflan, Lasso, Atrazine, Sutan? If you got them too deep, or you had a cultivator soup going too deep, you had a streak in the field where you had weeds. Okay? I'm going to dramatically impact that aerobic layer of soil where the weed seeds grow out of and dramatically change that environment as rapidly as I can. So then I have less weed concerns. And then here, I'm out there today with stupid. I want to know when I'm going to be working the ground to plant it. It's the 26th of May, and I'm walking the field, and I'm digging and got my hands in the soil, and the soil by now is getting like potting soil. It's really nice when you work a lot of stuff into it, and you go really shallow, and you got the browns and the greens, and by then I'd put a little chicken litter on it too to boost. I'm trying to build carbon as fast as I can in the soil. I'm growing soil. I don't worry about growing corn or beans. That takes care of itself. I want to grow soil. The soil is what grows the corn and beans. I don't have to worry about that. The soil can handle that. It's my job to grow the soil. Oh, here's a surround. I'm not going to let this go the whole length because we don't have time. But I go around the whole field, and it looks like that all the way around. Now, I'm going to work at what I call the finished tillage, real shallow. I want to take out the grass if I don't kill the alfalfa. I'm trying to get braver all the time to try to leave the majority of the alfalfa growing and plant right into it with a planter. And then as time goes on, see, I'm trying to get away from as much tillage. All right, now I no-till 30 months out of 48 months on a 4-year rotation. 30 months, there's no tillage at all. And I'm trying to get that window narrowed down. I've got green stuff growing here yet. I terminated on May 31st completely, pretty much. Well, there'll be some grow back up. But then I'm laying the corn by the first week in July, so there's a month in there, soil is exposed, and I'm doing tillage. And so I'm trying to narrow that window down all the time. Work the green stuff later and narrow that so I've got less exposure. And here I'm doing it with rye. And you're going to get to see more of the operation here as far as, this is the 70 acres that was T2. This was the rye before the soybeans on the 70-acre field. And here I'm working it. There's how thick it was when I double seeded it. I want massive root systems. I want to get as much squeezed out of that as I can. I want the roots forced to go deep, and I want just like sod. And when I work it, somebody asked me how I kill it. Once it gets so tall and you shred it, that rye is toast. It's done. I don't worry about terminating cover crops. They're going to terminate themselves. I mean, I don't worry about it. Some people start biting their nails because they're afraid their cover crop's going to get away from them. I want to make them mad. The madder I make that alfalfa, the more I feel it puts out allelopathic effects, like a skunk. If you get into a skunk territory, what's it do? You go out there and damage that plant, what do you think it's going to do? I'm not a scientist. I've not proven this. I've done no research. But I'm assuming that it must put out more allelopathic effects. Same with the rye. If I'll go out there and make it mad. I don't really want to kill it. I just want to make it mad. And then I'll terminate it pretty well 100% before I plant. And so that's kind of my strategy there. And then here it gives you an idea how tall it is. You can see the axle on the back tire of the tractor. Those are 16 9/38. They're a pretty tall tire for that size tractor. And here's how deep I go when I turn the compost on the second time over. I'm going about an inch deep with the IH490 disc to stir it. Now here's what I've got when I'm getting ready to plant. This is after it's been field cultivated. This is that rye field that we've been showing. And there's several things I do. I want a dust mulch. The old-timers, here again, old-timer stuff. Old-timers talked about a dust mulch. Now, it's not really dust. It's just real dry soil that's got size, you work the ground down to a decent seed bed. But I want bone-dry soil in that top inch. So when I field cultivate the last time, I'm just going to skim that top inch and mix air with it. I want to bring up any moisture with it. So when I plant, I got my wheels, my depth wheels and my press wheels running in dry soil. I'm not going to roll a weed seed into moisture and then sun hit it and you've got a weed popping out, growing before your beans come up or your corn or whatever you're planting. So it's very important to follow that advice. Now, if it goes ahead and rains right after I plant, if it rains on soil that's very, very dry, the results of that will be totally different than if it rains on it while it's still a little damp on top. I don't know why. But if you get a rain right after you have worked the ground and it's a little damp, you get crusting. And you're going to get a lot more weed and grass pressure show up. And I think probably some, if you think about it, you know what I'm saying because you've seen that and experienced that. If you haven't, pay attention to that and you'll start seeing that. But another thing I do, most of our foxtail ends up on our end row where we work the ground the first time and then we work it around and we're turning in the same place next to the fence or next to the road or next to the edge of the field. I don't do it that way. First time I work that field, I'm working the end rows and turning up next to the edge of the field. The next time I'm going all the way around that field 3 times or whatever, and I'm going to turn in a different spot away from the end row, away from the fence, and then I'm going to move out every time that I'm going to be in that field. I'm going to move away so I don't overwork the ground out there that gets the foxtail, and then that moves out into the field because foxtail seed gets started. So there's a method to my madness and things I do to stay away from having any grass, any weeds, anything in the field. So you'll see here as I take off the planter, you'll see how far out I got with my end row. Coming up, I think right there, you can see it right there. See? Okay, here's rotary hoeing. I think I was planting on, this was second rotary hoeing. I think I was planting on the 3rd day, you might remember. Here's the 10th, 7 days later. The first time I think I hoed on like the 4th day from planting. This is 7 days. This is 3 days more from the first rotary hoeing. Why? Because I think this was Saturday, and Sunday I go to church. So I just do it a day early if I've got something I'm going to do. One thing about rotary hoeing, like I said earlier, the only reason why you shouldn't be taking your row crop cultivation and your rotary hoeing seriously, and the only reason you shouldn't be doing that on time in a timely fashion, if there's a death in the family and it's your death, and shame on you for not scheduling somebody else to get it done. I mean, it is important. You can't go back and do it when you didn't do it. My number one call. Okay, here's what I've done. Got the rotary hoeing's over with, and here's what I have to deal with when it comes to weed control. There's not a person in this room with a single sweep cultivator, a Danish tine cultivator, Lilliston cultivator that couldn't clean this field up. That's where I want you to get, because you're going to look so smart when you can do that. Okay? And by hitting the green button every time with everything you do, and do it to the best of your ability, and keep hitting that green button and not the red button, it's that simple, the way I look at it. But I'm very particular about what I do and how I do it. But we'll show, I'm cultivating across the end as I'm filming, so I'm cultivating as I'm filming. Somebody turned down the volume. That's all right, isn't it? All that horsepower, that big John Deere. But that's what I expect every year, see? And I've worked with a lot of farmers, and I'm the cultivator guru. And I've seen a lot of times where by the time the beans get that tall, the weeds and grass are taller than the beans. Okay? And I was going crazy. I'm still crazy, but that's one of the reasons why I went ahead and thought I'd go back into farming, because then I can keep hitting the green button. You know, if I don't have control of the purse strings and control the go, no-go decision, then it's awful hard to end up with this, because you don't have to make too many mistakes and you end up messing the whole system up. Now here's the cultivator. This is not my cultivator. It's one on a farm I work on. You can see how close I set the blades right here. They're touching almost in back. And the beans fly through there. It slams the dirt in there real fast, covers up the weeds and grass, leaves the beans. And normally, I don't have to worry about doing a real good job because I don't have much competition, but I'm still very particular. Now, you can see I'm not staying on the road all the time, but the cultivator stays spot on because of the way the cultivator is set on the back of the tractor with the sway blocks up and your cutter wheels that guide it. It's very intuitive. That cultivator stays on. It lies for me. It makes me look better than what I am. Thanks for turning that volume down, whoever did. Okay. And here's the other farm. It's been rotary hoed twice. Now, you're going to see alfalfa. Alfalfa, the only plant out there besides corn is alfalfa. And that's what I want. There's not a person in this room that couldn't cultivate that field and have a perfectly clean crop with any cultivator that you got out there. And that's where I want you all to get. And it all has to boil down to understanding how we treat our soil. We cause our weeds. The weeds are supposed to be there if we cause them to supposed to be there. Here I'm cultivating. Well, pretty soon you'll get to see the cultivator. Whenever the driver turns around with the camera. I don't know if you'll be able to see the blades, but the blades are set real close. I set my blades real close, and you can see the alfalfa there. And if I had my way, it'd all look like that. People ask me about cutworm and wireworm. They say, Gary, don't you have any cutworm, wireworm? They're starting to worry me. I'm thinking, well, am I supposed to? And I don't know why I don't. I leave all that green stuff up until I plant. That's a recipe for disaster, isn't it? But I don't know. People say, Gary, that just can't be anything but dumb luck, you know. And I take a compliment with that because I think it pays to be a little dumb sometimes. But this here is another critique of a neighbor. This is giant ragweed. This is a beautiful field of soybeans, by the way. Giant ragweed and giant foxtail. This farm I farmed from 1980 to 1991 when I gave it up because my landlady had passed away. This particular farm was willed to their son that still wanted it farmed organically, but I wasn't going to be able to keep a full line of machinery around and support myself on 80 acres back in 1991. Now I'd love to have it because you can turn some real dollars with organic on 80 acres. When I had this, the beans fields looked just like the fields you've seen. Okay? There is a father, wonderful people. In fact, they were related to the guy that got me started in farming. So I have no ill feelings toward them whatsoever. They were children of the people that owned this farm. That's why I lost it. When the landlady passed away, her husband handed the farm on to the children, which is the way it should be. A farm should stay in the family with the kids. But there's 2 sons and a dad. I'm sure they've all got at least bachelor's degrees, probably some agronomy, quite a bit of agronomy. You got 9 pounds of brains. Okay? I'm a dummy, uneducated. You see, what I do is not supposed to work. It goes against what we're taught, but the old-timers taught it to me. And I did what the old-timers did, and I got the results the old-timers got. And so I've never veered from it. And I've always tried to figure out why. How could people end up with that? Now, here's another thing I'll tell you. I am so confident and so humbled by this system working so well that I will guarantee you, I will bet you any amount of money that I could go in there, and in less than 365 days, the weed and grass pressure would disappear. Got any takers? I feel in my heart that if we follow the irrefutable laws of the soil, but see, what we do is we go out and we do a soil test. And I'm not against soil tests, and minerals are very important. That's a fact, okay? But what happens when we think we put the minerals on, we've solved our problem and build our soil, we mess with our 3-pound brain and fool it. Our job is to build biology, okay? Biology will build the minerals. But we take the soil, we test it, analyze, diagnose what the problem is, and we treat, listen to this, we treat the symptom. Low in calcium, base saturation not right, sulfur. That's a symptom of a sick and dying soil. A soil that should have a lot more biology. Until we fix the biology and fix the hunger of that biology, we haven't solved anything by putting minerals on it. So now we plant a plant in that soil, corn, soybeans. Corn and soybean grows up, it gets a problem. So we diagnose the problem and we treat the symptom. Then an animal eats that plant, either the grain or the foliage. The animal gets a problem. So we diagnose, analyze, diagnose, and treat the symptoms of the animal. Then man eats the animal or the plant, has a problem. Cancer, heart disease, autism, you name it. Just list them all. What do? We diagnose and we treat. Nothing that cures anything. Is this totally wrong? Am I off base? The way we have to fix it is go all the way back to the source of the problem, the soil. Or wait a minute. I think we need to go back farther. The person that's taking care of the soil has a soul that's starved to death and can't resist stupid's overtures. You see what I'm saying? We can choose to push that green button. And there's only one thing that feeds the soul, and that's prayer. Because it doesn't come from this world. It comes from a no place, before time, space, and matter was ever put into existence. Until we build that knowingness inside us and build that creative process in the soil, then we're going to have pestilence from the soil, the plant, the animal, and man. Until we're going to solve insects and weeds and grass and all those problems, we've got to solve the creative process in the soil, which will make it so the creative process is healthy in the plant, the creative process is healthy in the animal, the creative process will be healthy in man, and it'll totally change the picture. I made all that up. No, I didn't. That's what I was taught. And that's what Dr. Albrecht shared with Irvin Jasperson. You won't find it in the Albrecht papers. Okay? But that's where all this lingo I'm using originated from. That was the infancy of what I was taught was Dr. Albrecht. He started out, and it's been years since I've read his biography, he was going to be a medical doctor, and he was going to study how to be a doctor. And it wasn't too far into it, he realized, wait a minute, all I can do here is treat the symptoms. In order to fix the problem, I got to get back to the soil. And that's when the whole process was started, how to take care of and treat our soil. That's why I told Irvin Jasperson, don't you know that the healthier livestock starts in the soil? And so, see, weeds and grass, we're going to fight them. There's not going to be a tool made that's going to control them. They'll get worse every year until we get back and solve the deficiency of the soil in the form of a biological deficiency, a carbon deficiency. Minerals, absolutely, that's a fact. They're important, but facts are not truth. We killed truth on the cross, hated that truth. Stupid started his own process called facts. Facts are not truth. They're 99% truth, 99% facts, 99% truth, 1% lie is what a fact is. Okay? When you use facts to farm with, that's the difference between facts and truth as is between a smashing success and a miserable failure in organic, in my opinion. Get back to the soil. Get back to having the courage. You were made for greatness. Get back to saying, stupid, get behind me, and make those decisions that build that soil back. And we all need to do better. This is for me too. I don't get a pass on this. I don't get a bye. I have to live in the same world with the same weather challenges, the same problems that we all live in together. And so it's getting in together and pulling for one another. Working the ground less harshly. Putting back more. I flew an airplane for a number of years, and when I was getting my training, I would fly different places and get advanced training. And I flew to this one place, and this guy got up and spoke about lift is what got the airplane in the air. That camber on the top side of the wing, you know, and the flatness underneath. So you got Bernoulli's law. It sucked that airplane into the air, and the guy was going on about that, and that's all fact. But the truth is, until you put fuel in the tank, you're not going anywhere. See? And so you always got to look for the whole story. Facts are just a little piece of it. Anhydrous ammonia, unit of nitrogen produces a bushel of corn. Okay? It's fact, not the truth. The intent of what we're raising is to produce food. If you're going to compress that corn into a suitcase, wait for the front of a tractor, because we weigh it to determine if it's what we want to grow, because we want more weight to fill the wagon with weight so we can take it to the elevator and make money. But when the livestock started eating that hybrid corn years ago, we had to start adding mineral to the feed because the corn didn't contain the mineral it used to contain. Didn't contain the protein it used to contain. Then later we started using herbicides because our soil got poorer and poorer, and insects because the plants got sicker and sicker. And then we had to have antibiotics in people and animals, and it just keeps going on and on and on. And it doesn't quit and never will quit until we get back to working with the creative processes in the soil and getting that soil healthy and robust again. And getting so if you go out there and lay down and take a nap for 2 hours, you wake up and you're half naked. Okay? Any questions? Yes, sir.
So with the neighbor crop like that, what kind of buffer zone do you have?
Well, that neighbor there is not my neighbor. I used to farm that farm, but I farm about 6 miles from this farm right here now. But that's, you know, and I know exactly what they're doing wrong, what they need to change to get a different reaction or response or consequence.
Gary, biologically, how do you differentiate where you're lightly disking your rye in versus a crimper roller type system?
You know, that's 6 of one and a half and a dozen of another, and that question's on my mind a lot because we got the oxidation reduction. We know that through exudates, I think that's a lot better way to build carbon than through putting organic matter above ground into the soil. And I'm not a scientist, so I really don't know. I'm trying to do less tillage all the time. I think some tillage can be beneficial as long as we're tilling for a purpose. Did that answer your question at all? Because I can make up another answer. But that's a real quandary on my heart, because it'd sure be nice. All we had to do is go out and pluck the fruit, harvest. And so you got the kerns and some of those other ideas that are being bounced around, of what direction we need to head in agriculture. You have a question? Got someone? Okay, go ahead.
Gary, if your cousins were wise enough to ask you what they could do with that, what would be your suggestions?
It's not my cousins.
Well,
the family that used to own. They're descendants of my landowners, the landlord I used to have back in the 80s. What would be my suggestion? They have a 4-year rotation, but they take 100% of the alfalfa clover hay off. There is not a more depleting crop in the universe than alfalfa clover when you take it from your soil. And they've depleted the trace minerals, starved the biology. And see, when you concentrate, I used to get, when I first started, I'd get foxtail, just as thick as it could grow. And I would work that in real shallow, and there is nothing works better for a herbicide for foxtail, as far as a natural herbicide, than working in like-kind substance. So right there is the secret to getting that to disappear. If you put a fence around that and just nobody touch it and just let it keep growing, I don't know how many years it takes, but eventually there wouldn't be foxtail and giant ragweed growing. See? Once it does its job, it goes on. The earth will rebuild if man would vanish from the planet. The earth will become very fertile prairie again. We have to learn how to make a profit, and as we're building soil. And there's the key. And like the gentleman asked in the back, Dan Sutter, right? Yep. He was asking me about the question he's got. This is what we're all, I think, should be focused on, is we've got to make it so 5 years from now our soil is totally better than it is now, and we've made a living for 5 years. And we've got to have that attitude that we have to keep making it better. And building organic matter takes a lot of time and a lot of work. It doesn't happen by accident. But most of us are taught, because we're focused on the bottom line, the profit, that we try to take as much as we can possibly take and put back the least amount we can possibly put back, and that's a recipe for a very deficient, depleted soil. And so what I try to do is be very generous at what I put back, because I feel like I try to be unselfishly greedy. I'm giving back with purpose in mind. I'm going to get more. But if you're just greedy and not unselfishly greedy, you get by taking. And then next year you farm less organic matter, less fertility. And so what happens is then you have less to work with. Okay? And so I've coined the term learning how to be unselfishly greedy. Learn how to get by giving. And one of the things that's killing agriculture, I think, and back when I learned this system, the high cost of production was talked about. High cost of production is what everybody, that was the mantra back then. And you see, if we had cows, and we had 10 cows, and they all had their calves, and we weaned them, and it was time to breed them back, and we put the bull in with them, and one of them didn't breed back, whatever the reason, we would classify that cow, I think, as infertile. Okay, now we could take that cow to a university and have them do surgery on that animal and implant that animal so they would be impregnated. Okay? In agriculture, we do the same thing with the conventional mentality. We think we make the soil fertile when we've only implanted it. And so if we sell the grain for more money, or if you were to sell the calf that eventually was born with a full-term pregnancy for a profit over what it costs to have that done to the cow, that cow then could be considered profitable and productive, but she is not reproductive. Same with how we farm, with the mentality. We're going to impregnate the soil with the minerals we're taking off and extracting, not even counting for the energy we're taking from the soil, the carbon. And as long as we can sell that grain for more money than the inputs were, we say the farm's productive. But it is still not reproductive. And it will not be reproductive until we get the robustness and the biological activity fast enough and healthy enough that we can generate out of that 2,365,000 pounds of mineral in the top 7 inches on an acre. Get that in play. It's there. Dr. Becker did research and claims there's like 1,000 years of phosphorus in the top 4 inches. 70 million pounds of nitrogen above every acre. We as farmers, we're sitting in the driver's seat, but we've got to keep ag business out of our pocket. Okay? They talk about efficiency. How many farmers have we lost? If we're so efficient, where'd all them efficient farmers go that aren't here any with us? And how many sitting here today won't be here in 2, 3, 4, 5 years because you're just so efficient? Agribusiness is efficient. They've made farmers very inefficient because they've helped us destroy our reproductive ability of our soil. So we can take advantage of that free 70 million pounds of nitrogen free, and the free phosphorus and potash and boron and zinc and a host of other trace minerals that I can't even name, I can't even pronounce them. Question?
Yeah, my question was, in your fallow year, when you have the 14-way seeding or whatever, what would the effects be to graze that off as opposed to disc it or rototill it or whatever?
Thank you so much, because I had not talked about that. Incredible is what would happen as long as you manage it correctly. When I started back in the 80s, I just put cattle out after I took one cutting of hay to feed my brood cows, wrapped that up with round bales, and then when it grew back up and got a little stimulus so I wouldn't have bloat problem, I put my cows out with their calves. As long as your cattle operation is making you money, okay. But I would rather see a person use their cattle to build their soil than to use their soil to build their cattle. If you use them properly with mob grazing and some of the things we've learned today, I think that's absolutely dynamite with what you could do with building your soil and also have the cattle.
So how would you do that after they graze it off? Your photo there, May, whatever, 7th or 10th, you brought it down. And could you just graze it off, and what would you do?
What would I do? If I was going to mob graze it, what I would do when it got up to a certain maturity, like they recommend, I would put the grazers in there and let them go through it and eat the top third, tromp a third, and leave the bottom third and let it grow back and jump back. My understanding is the roots die back, and when it grows back up, the roots go back down. You're just pumping that soil full of carbon all the time that's happening, and you end up with these cattle as well, so you gain not once but twice. So I think it's a fabulous addition to a farm operation, and I would do it. I could start doing it as early as probably that first spring for that, and do it every time it gets grown back up to that point, and then work the ground and put it into crop. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because here again, I've been out of livestock so many years, and I've never did do the mob grazing because didn't know that. We were ignorant to that concept back in the 80s.
All right, we have, what were the 2 biologic products that you named, and is that just kind of a, once you do it in that T1 year, yeah, kind of discuss that a little bit.
Okay, yes. It's most important when you start out, in my opinion. If you put the food there, they will show up, but it's like you can dig a pond, and if you don't stock it with fish, you can wait for a stork to fly over to drop a fish in, but you probably be waiting a while. And because time is money, I think it's important that we inoculate that soil with beneficial bacteria, also bring that carbon source in with all those minerals, and we can create a spark that can cause a firestorm or biological activity. And I want that as fast as possible because I want to get there as soon as possible. And the first product was Residuce, and you can purchase it from Agri-Energy. And I tell you, if you doubt that product works, Eric Johnson, who works for Agri-Energy, I think he drew the short straw because he's been the one that's had to put up with me, and I hadn't farmed for a few years and hadn't used a sprayer for a long time, and I couldn't get the sprayer to work. So here comes Eric out it didn't take him long. It's 2 hours away, but it's like he just showed up right away. And he helped me get the sprayer going, and he left me some 3 or 4 jugs or buckets of stuff of the Residuce. And I didn't go ahead and use it, didn't need it because got this thing to work, and it sat in the shed, and the buckets got round, And I was afraid to hardly touch them. They might blow up, you know. And so I did turn the cap off because it pushed the spigot out, and I turned the cap off, and I pulled that seal down in there, you know, and of course some of the stuff comes up. And I carry that out, and I pour it on my compost pile where I garden, and I got these concrete cinder blocks, and I got this big pile of compost, and I just poured it all over that. And I went on about my day and my business and my week, and one day I noticed there wasn't anything left there. It was just black, sooty-looking stuff that was about that much. And so the product is, I mean, anybody asked me whether it works or not, or a snake oil, for a long time I just laughed. I uncontrollably laughed, you know, because it's amazing what the stuff will do. And then the other product is Leonardite coal. It's a very poor form of coal that through years and years of anaerobic decomposition underneath water, that all the minerals are preserved, and it's a lot of carbon. You put that on the soil in the form of like limestone. It's ground up. There are other products that they have that they put it in a pellet as well. But where I get that product, I'll give you the guy's name here and phone number because I've got it in my phone here. Okay, get rid of that guy, Andy. Okay. That's all right. He can handle it. Okay, his number is 217-322-2639. And Andy is a tremendous resource because with all the years of research they've done at Western Illinois University, and Western Illinois University is unique in the fact that the farm that they do research on, they pay rent on that farm. They have to earn their own way there. Yeah, they don't live on grant money to do their research. And Andy's got a good handle on what this product's all about. So give Andy a call, and he may never talk to me again, but that'll be all right because Andy and I are we're great friends, so it won't be a problem. Questions?
Any questions?
Nope. It's a loaded question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Yay. The picture you showed a few slides back where you took multi-species cover crop and you mowed it and then you worked it in the ground. I'll score that a 10. What would you score where what the regular farmers are doing is they're growing a good cover crop and then they spray a chemical on it to kill it so they can plant. Now, what would you score that?
Well, you know, I've had lots of thoughts about that because I do know through my years of training and being taught that let's say that you go out there and till the ground and you work it in a tad too deep where it's in an anaerobic layer. The decomposition process will produce methane, formaldehyde, and lactic acid and other negative chemistry that could be harmful to the soil as well as using a herbicide to burn something back. I prefer not to use anything that's injurious to the soil, like a toxic substance like that obviously is in our food chain and stuff like that. But before I'm very grateful to the guys that are doing everything they can to take better care of the soil. I'm trying to take better care of mine. So I would rather they didn't have to use the Roundup on it to knock it back. But you know what? I think if you talk to every one of them, they feel the same way as I do. They wish they didn't have to either. So I salute them and encourage them to keep on with their process of doing better and better and better. And I hope we can continue to do better and better together. Because as farmers, we need to pray for one another, cheer each other on, and keep doing the good work of trying to improve this world a little bit and our soils. But I'm going to stay away from burning it down with the toxic chemicals because that's against my religion, I guess you might say. Did I answer your question? Oh, what's the score? If what I'm doing is a 10, well, naturally I don't want them to beat me. Theirs is a 9 or less. So, yeah, the glyphosate is causing serious problems, serious problems. And so, we have to just keep praying about this thing because we have to go through a shift here if we would pull all the herbicides out from underneath people right all of a sudden, I think there'd be some serious consequences. So we need to keep moving in the directions that we're moving together, cheering one another on, that we get better and better and understand what's going on and how to make it work better. So I hope that helps, but I'm not going to change to burn back my stuff.
I feel like I'm drinking out of a fire hose, and I love it.
Yeah.
With this, are you saying this field or a field like this, with what you described, with the residues and the lintonite coal, or if I'm pronouncing that right,
Yeah.
in T1 can or should produce what we saw earlier? That's what you're saying, right?
I would
Working
not
as
be
a-
the least bit fearful of it.
Okay. Just
I would
wanted,
not be
just
the
want
least
to get a
bit fearful of
second
it.
confirmation on it.
All right, let's give a round of applause for Gary here.